Yesterday, and as a community, really shocked, and we are denouncing that when it happens. And I can assure you, I can report to you guys that Bangladesh Americans as a whole is not something like that have been studied. We are not like Pakistan Americans or outside Bangladesh, and we are really denounced in our all kind of activities. These are of our subordinates. They are busy with their things. Since the company is easy. At last, I have got my friend, a journalist. This one, his name is Mahmoud. He works with NTV, National Television Bangladesh. We had Tibetan community offices in London. He wanted to speak over the Skype, but we couldn't align the time with his available time. That's why we are missing him. My brother and one of our board of directors for our Chapter Center for Democracy in the Middle East, in the panel. I'm sorry, I'm missing the call. In Dhaka, he sent telegram to Washington DC to the State Department that US policies aligning with Pakistan is in fact letting the Pakistani military towards genocide in Bangladesh. But at that time, the government, State Department, duo, they didn't agree with him, and they called him back, and then he resigned. But after he resigned, the cause of our liberation, it got international attention. So that way, his resignation and his moral position on the issue, on the cause of Bangladesh, expedited our cause of independence. So as a Bangladeshi American, when I live in America and the United States, and I speak on the issues of human rights and democracy, I believe I cannot miss to name him at the very first. So from my point of view and from all of my considerations, I have decided to give this organization the name by his name. So this is Archer Center for Democracy. We promote democratic values and human rights, both in the United States and also in Bangladesh. So with all of these, I want to invite my friends, Sheikh.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my pleasure. Since my student life, I have been working in my native country, Bangladesh, to promoting democracy and human rights. My migration in this great country of democracy and freedom has increased my commitment to democracy and human rights further. So, as a Bangladeshi American, I cannot sit idle when a race of people is being together targeted to be cleansed by their own military. But we cannot stop these atrocities alone. So all need to come forward together for the sake of humanity. This is not only a challenge for Bangladesh. The ongoing Rohingya killing is also a challenge for our civilization. On behalf of the Archer Blood Center for Democracy, I thank you all again for coming and joining us today.
Two members of House Foreign Affairs Committee, and also he has tremendously expressed his concern on the Rohingya crisis.
Ethnic cleansing that's happening in Rohingya, to the Rohingya people. We strongly condemn the situation that's happening and the atrocities that are happening. Okay?
I'd like to request now to present their papers to Bangladeshi expert on Rohingyas first, and then we'll hear from Mr. Adam Carroll, who is working at the United Nations for the cause of the Rohingyas. Then our respected speakers will speak, and those part will be conducted by our board of directors, Sheikh Musa. So may I request now first Mr. Salahuddin Noman. He's an wing commander of Bangladesh Air Force. He's now retired. He's been living in New York City. And he's an expert on Bangladesh security. There is a journal of Bangladesh military in Bangladesh. Its name is Defense Journal. And he's one of the regular contributors of the journal. And he's also the bureau chief for that journal, Defense Journal of Bangladesh Military. Mr. Salahuddin Noman Chaudhry.
The present situations and the upcoming security threat that is we are intercepting for Bangladesh. So how these things happen. This thing is going on since 1978 with Bangladesh, between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and this time it is a very, very huge number. The atrocities, you call it the genocide or slow poisoning genocide or ethnic cleansing. In any terminology you term, the thing is that it will not reduce the pain and the misery of the sufferers. So that's the focus point. So these things happen if you just see the dynamics of the regional power, political power and influence, we can really figure out that why. There are two big actors, we should say, everybody knows, in that region. China and India has got their individual interests in Myanmar, and also they have got interest in the Bangladesh because the Bangladesh is located in an area that has got a tremendous, the geopolitical importance. But why Myanmar is getting more favor than the country which is burdened with so many people? Till date, it is 640,000 Rohingya Muslims fled the border and came to Bangladesh. For a country like Bangladesh, it's small size, heavily densely populated area. It's very really burdened to continue for a long time to look after these people, these destitute people. But of course, we are working up to the last because this is on humanitarian ground, right? So many people have been killed, and so many infants were slaughtered. People were drowned to the river and died. The women were insulted, raped like anything. So the whole world media is watching this thing, but there is no end to it. So what I'm trying to say, I must appreciate the foresighted assessment of our Honorable Prime Minister, who a couple of months before told to one of the journalists in Al Jazeera, he asked the Prime Minister that the issue is going on, the problem is lying with the Rohingya people in Myanmar, how you are going to address. She very specifically told, that's not our issue. Till the time this 25th August incident took place this year, before that, I'm talking about the interview took place before this, the influx Rohingyas were coming into the Bangladesh. So I appreciate because she could anticipate what are the problem we're going to face as a whole in Bangladesh. But she could not stand on her decision because of few reasons. The main prime reason is that the humanitarian ground. Humanity comes first. Because we cannot let the people, die, get killed, and we don't allow them to get into Bangladesh and shelter them. That's not, it goes with the ethics and values of the Bangladeshi people or the definition of humanity. So we are housing them. But question is that, how long? The interesting part is that we know the relationship between Bangladesh and India. So far, they're enjoying the highest level of, bonding, friendship, as told by some of the Indian diplomats. Now, the relationship between China and Bangladesh is known all over the relationship. Means any government comes to power in Bangladesh, no matter what, they are maintaining a very, the harmonious and the good diplomatic relationship, political relationship. So question comes, if both the countries are having a very good relation with Bangladesh, then why we have to live with so much of burden? So here I'd like to refer to two interesting part. During 2005, once I was undergoing a training on counterterrorism in Hawaii, Asia Pacific School for Security Studies. So every day we used to attend the class and the learned instructors to come and discuss about so many things. And there was a name that used to be uttered very frequently, that is Mr. Osama bin Laden. Then I just very curiously asked my teacher, so the West or other, the mighty country has got so much of power, they can go to some other country and bring out the president from the foxhole and hang them to death. Why can't you catch this gentleman? He was very honest to his reply, saying, end of the day, it's money, politics, and power. Period. That is the reason that since 25th August of this year, the last phase is going on now, I'm not talking about the 78 or 90s, we could not settle the issue till now. We had the instrument signed by two countries, between Myanmar and Bangladesh in November, in last month, based on the guideline that was prepared in 1992, where it is clearly told that this is the way we cannot solve these issues permanently, unless we follow the durable solution that was planned or formulated by the Kofi Annan, the former United Nations Secretary General. But nobody is listening to his word till now. So the reason is that again I say that money, politics, and power. So how does the commerce comes between these two countries like China and India, that China is having the dual gas pipeline connected from the Rakhine state until the Yunnan province that's in Kunming. They are targeting not to emerge as a global the regional leader only, but also the global leader. That's what they're working on, they're working for. So they are trying to get the Bay of Bengal, the deep sea port, to have their, the free enroad to sell their oil, gas, or anything from Russia, Kazakhstan, and if there's any situation comes in that the Malacca Strait is blocked, so they don't have to worry about it. So China will favor Myanmar, then the problem lying with Bangladesh now. That's the reality. The same goes to India, has got similar kind of interest with Myanmar, but definitely the China has taken upper hand in this scenario. So now, India is not railing behind the Bangladesh, because they have established probably in 2016 the deep port sea in Sitwa port, and they have border issues with the Myanmar like Tripura and Mizoram. They want to keep that area very safe. So the interest comes first. Now, there's in diplomatic language, in diplomacy, we know that there is nothing called permanent friendship. The permanent remain only one thing, that's the interest. So here, both the countries are looking after their own interests. That's very simple. Now, the interesting part is that back in 90s, there was another tension between the Myanmar and Bangladesh. And I was a very young officer in the Air Force. I was deployed. To be, and we are prepared to go for the final solution, that is when everything fails, that military comes in. But definitely we are praying to God, so we don't have to go for the war. They were tortured. They have lost their loved one. They have lost their houses. Their houses were reduced to ashes, and they never know where they will go. Now they are mostly living under the sky, open sky. Our government is trying hard to give them proper shelter, which is not possible so quickly for a country like Bangladesh, but we are trying hard, giving them the proper sanitation, giving them the treatment, medicines. We are running tremendous shortage of the resources, but we are trying hard. But how long a country like Bangladesh can continue? That's the question. Now, the guy has lost his loved one. It's very easy to, win his heart or her heart to take him on my side or somebody else's side. He may be He may be, recruited for a bunch of people or involved some kind of, terrorist activities. And unfortunately, in the recent past, some of the incidents really put everybody in a very alarming position that we have to be very, very careful to address this one. This is number one. And moreover, you see the international, when this persecution was going on, people were being driven out from the Myanmar, forcefully by the Myanmar army. The international militant, the Islamic militant Al-Qaeda, categorically said that whatever the suppression, the repression is going on our Muslim brother, you'll not be left aside. You'll have the same test. So this kind of provocating threatening language really becomes a very, very matter of great concern for a Bangladesh, country like Bangladesh, because we people generally very peace-loving. I'm not saying that I'm from Bangladesh. You can, of course, have your own resources, information. Very peace-loving people. We just go very simple heart to interact with the people. One or two of these incidents put us back. Like we said that my friend Mr. Qasim Munib denounced, so we strongly condemned the incident took place yesterday. It's never happened. He doesn't go with the ethics and values of the Bangladeshi people. It's simple. So that's what, now once these deprived people, these destitute people is getting into Bangladesh, if they're driven in the wrong way, which just for your knowledge, when the Myanmar army started killing the people from 25th August 2017, within a month, as many as 400,000 people came to Bangladesh. And our government was not ready to accept such a, influx Rohingyas coming in too. So there are many people march with the local crowds because they look alike, they talk alike, their cultures, values, religion, everything is the same. So nobody can differentiate that, hey, you are a Rohingya Muslim, where you are out of the camp. It should be they have spread out all over. So now, there's a saying that necessity knows no law. If I am hungry today, if I see my loved one has been killed, I don't feel like to take a revenge. If somebody give me an ounce, I'll be happy to have it with me. Right? I am running short of money or food. Somebody is saying, hey, I'll give you very good healthy food, come and do it for me. I'll do that because I'll not think about what's going to happen, what the law says or the rule says. So this is a point that really our government is taking care of it, but unfortunately in the first month, I said 400,000 people came in, many people just spread out. So if they join, hope so, we will contend everything. It's so far, there's no doubt, but I'm sure that this is a matter of great concern. Number two, that I've said that number three is, like, the first one was the military attack. We're expecting no military attack so far, but we are ready, definitely. As an ex-soldier, I can say we are ready, but we don't expect it. Okay. The number three is that, recently, in the last week, there was a seminar on the Rohingya issues, that what are the problems that we are facing. Our information minister, Mr. Hassanullah Inu, categorically said that some of the local influential leaders turning and motivating these people to do the drug business, very popularly known some kind of medicine called Yaba. Yaba is some kind of drug. I never tested it, so I can say that how does it work. But I heard a lot of things, and you won't believe, daily it is perhaps 2 million pieces of Yaba being sold at $200. So other will be motivated. Somebody comes up, you come and do some militant activities, get some
girls who are not married, they have taken medical treatment in Bangladesh for having pregnant. They are not married, they were forcibly raped in their country. And so these are the scenario, and Mr. Noman has also added that how it is not only we think that Bangladesh can do this, we need the help of the international community, especially from China, but China has some strategic views there. We need to mobilize China's hand in favor of the issue. Not only the US can do anything from my experience. So, having said that, I would like to request now my friend Sheikh Musa Drama. He's a peace activist. He is also the publisher of the Muslim Community Report newspaper, the first one that covers the Muslim here for the community causes. And he has a clear understanding of what the Muslim community in the United States needs to do. And I welcome Mr. Sheikh Musa.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, please feel free, come here. Please do.
Anywhere in the world becomes, painful to all of us, because right now the family is getting tighter and tighter. So by way of acknowledging my meeting and associating with Kauthar, Kauthar, we met through our newspaper, the Muslim Community Report. After 9/11, I had decided, along with my wife's permission, to find what, ails the Muslim world. That was my goal. What was keeping Muslims from progressing instead of regressing? And, some of those answers came by way of building relationships and, being frank to the Muslim community and confronting Muslim leaders and challenging, what the Muslims long held to be undisputable facts. And we did all that. So we met with Kauthar and, he asked me, why is Muslim Community Report? A lot of Muslims are concerned about anything that has to do with Muslim, Muhammad, Abdullah, whatever. And I said the very reason why people are concerned about that name is the exact reason why we call it a Muslim Community Report, because we want to be bold, and so that nobody will question, the objective. And we had a discussion, and as I always do with many people that I meet since 9/11, my goal is to convert every Muslim that I talk to and to refuse to be converted. And so far, I have done a great job, converting a lot, and I have not been converted yet. So Kauthar, we spoke and about the same subject, what is the problem in the Muslim world? And I was able to convince him. And I think you're a journalist. People depend on your pen. Your positions, your opinions, they're powerful. And join us, because the paper, even though it is a commercial enterprise, but the main foundation is giving dawah, meaning preaching, to the world about the authenticity of who we are. And I said, now the first thing that we have to do is we got to build a relationship between Muslims and the Jewish community. He said, oh, no. My background, number one, I'm a journalist. Number two, I'm from Bangladesh. We do not have any type of diplomatic relationship with Israel. And I said, great. And then we begin now. So you have to go on the ground, get a pen name, change your name, whatever. But from now on, your job is to cement the relationship between the state of Israel and Bangladesh. And then he asked me, where do I start? So I referred him to a person to talk to. And I think they met, and that person is Rabbi Capital, called the panelist.
I'll call.
Okay.
If you want to say something about the Rohingyas, how the
Yeah.
United States can help, how the Muslim United States and other religions.
Well, as I said in the opening, the world is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And it is no longer that I'm from Bangladesh, therefore the issue of Bangladesh is my exclusive interest. Or, I'm Muslim, therefore I'm only concentrating on the issues of the Muslim world. Those days are gone. Right now, we are a family in one house. And therefore our job is to making sure that every part of the home is to our liking. And the problem of, Myanmar, I've learned about it from, Brother Carol. I mean, he used to be very, very, the first time that I learned about it is from Myanmar, from Brother Carol, long time ago, years actually before this. and he was very, very active. And then, later on, I don't know if it was him or somebody else who had connected me to a journalist in Bangladesh as well as in Myanmar. Until today, I receive reports, pictures and articles and, horrendous pictures, what is happening there. But, my knowledge about what is going on is very, very limited and mostly from Google. Therefore, I want to defer any statement about what is going on, to those who are more qualified to talk about.
I didn't work under him directly, but he's my boss in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Dhaka. And after that, he switched to the United Nations for a senior level job, and he finished his job. He took it.
Diplomacy is the art of the possible. And no matter what, whether a country is big or small, strong or relatively weak, or has many friends or has relatively few friends, there are always limitations. Also, there are also always options and possibilities. So, and those who are in the policy making level, those who are in the decision making level, at some point they have to exercise a judgment and come to a decision. So the arrangement, it's not actually an agreement, it is called an arrangement, that was signed between Bangladesh and Myanmar, one can raise lots of questions about it, but as I said, diplomacy is the art of possible. They exercised a value judgment, and they did so with the government of Bangladesh came to this arrangement, signed this arrangement, the foreign minister did so following consultation with a lot of friends and regional and global powers, and after going through a certain process. So I think I would like to say that, you see, they have been very, very focused in trying to reach an agreement, realizing that fully that the dimension of the problem, the importance of solving the problem as quickly as possible for very many reasons, including the security concerns that we just heard, and mostly for the fact that it is a problem that Myanmar has to solve. It is Myanmar's problem, and Myanmar has created this problem for itself. Myanmar has 135 nationalities, in a population of something like 54 or 56 million, I think 54 million. 135 nationalities recognized, but they still could not recognize. In fact, the Aung San Suu Kyi's father had recognized Rohingyas as a minority, but Aung San Suu Kyi, and I would rather say that the military establishment in Myanmar, who had a role in crafting the latest constitution, and their Citizenship Act of 1982 excluded the Rohingyas. So it's a problem they have created, and they have aggravated that problem for themselves to the gravest suffering of the Rohingya people, to the gravest suffering of the religious minorities in Rohingya, and created in the process a problem also for Bangladesh. And as we heard, that this is not the first time that the problem was, Bangladesh had to deal with this problem. This was dealt with. Bangladesh had to face a similar situation in 1978, and again in 1992, 92, right? Yeah, 91, 92, and again this time. But the scale and the dimension of the problem this time is much greater, huge. And the suffering of the people is much greater. Now, Bangladesh, I think we have suffered ourselves as during our own liberation war as refugees. So we understand the suffering of the refugees. Besides the basic human values, our people put very high, this is very fundamental to the faith of our people. So Bangladesh has been on the high moral ground by giving shelter to these people who have been driven out of their country, of their homes, and have been deprived of their basic rights. So, and that Bangladesh was able to mobilize that, high moral ground to marshal Myanmar was a reluctant party, to marshal enough support to bring them to an agreement, an arrangement. And that is not the end point, that is, I would say, a beginning point. There are a couple of things. You see, as I said, today Security Council received a report. Security Council has been briefed on the developments. I don't know exactly what happened because it was in the afternoon today. We'll get to know about it tonight or tomorrow. But the fact that Security Council is seized with this issue, with this problem, and is acting on this issue. And in that, I think we have the very good friends who have been very vocal, including USA, both in the government and also in the Congress. We have tremendous support from the European community. Recently, I think a couple of weeks ago, the foreign ministers of Germany, the foreign minister of Sweden, Japan, and the EU, I think in a group, they visited Bangladesh, they went to the camps, and they issued a very strong statement at the end of that, and that's very strong support, not just material support, but also political support, policy support, diplomatic support for resolving this issue, this problem. China may not have been as forthcoming as, say, the other permanent members of the Security Council, UK, France, and USA. But while it did not allow a Security Council resolution to be adopted, basically the same, I think it is a compliment to the Bangladesh diplomacy, that basically the same content that would have been there in the Security Council resolution was issued by agreement as a presidential statement, which is under the circumstances, and to the presidential statement, China agreed, and Russia, another permanent member, did not object. It also went along. So I think that is a very, very important development and a big achievement for Bangladesh in terms of finding a solution, a respectable solution for the Rohingya people, and a reasonable solution for the main parties to this situation, Bangladesh and Myanmar. Working towards that, I think it is a very significant move. China, by agreeing to have that, the presidential statement, the UN Security Council has been diplomacy, a lot of things get done through informal channels. And I think the proof of that is the support. I think China has been playing a very constructive role. Even if it has as our friend explained, it has possibly more strategic interest in cultivating the government of Myanmar. But then China has repeatedly asserted that China is a good friend of both Myanmar and Bangladesh. And it is true. Before the arrangement was signed, 2 days before that, the Chinese foreign minister visited Bangladesh. Obviously, they had a consultation. And after the arrangement was signed, the commander-in-chief of the Myanmar army, who actually wields the levers of power, much more than the formal machinery of the government, was invited to China for consultations. And he was there. I assume, I hope, that this is one of the issues they covered. That doesn't mean that the commander-in-chief of the Myanmar army has been neutralized. He recently issued a statement, which is a matter of concern, saying that only those would be allowed to come in that are accepted by the citizens of Rakhine state.
New York or in the United States is that we are Bangladeshi American or we are Israeli American. We are all American. So, as a member of American society, our responsibility is to work jointly and to cooperate all our communities so that we can help each other. But when we think of our country back in home, I understand we have some differences, but that should not be a problem to work closely together to help each other's community here in the United States. With that belief, I was really moved by Dr. Kaplan's view.
Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah is a very interesting enough, in America, it's become a major holiday. In the Jewish religion, it's a very minor holiday. I guess it's what we call the Jewish response to Christmas, because we were once not here. We're here, and we had all the other folks not destroyed. And that's, I guess, that's a cause to celebrate. And I want to commend Mr. Ruckman's remarks about the moral high ground. It's a very important piece. Certainly the Jewish community, one of the people I will see tonight, or I will speak to tonight, is my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is a survivor, what we call a survivor of the concentration camps of World War II. When the evilness of Nazi Germany attempted to destroy us and did almost a very good job of killing certainly 6 million people in a horrific way. The tales you tell of the rapes, the tales you tell of the displacement, the tales that you've told of people being forced from their homes and being exterminated is something, unfortunately, we have lived in a very real way. And it sits not only in our minds today, but in our memories, but in our consciousness of what could be, should forces, any forces, not be met in a moral way, not be met with a moral force and saying this is simply unacceptable. So, as a Jewish community here in New York, because that's who I represent, I don't represent the Jewish community worldwide, although I'm part of it. I don't represent the Jewish community in other countries, although we are connected to it. We are a worldwide family. The Jewish community of New York, as it finds out more about the horrendous plight of the Rohingya in Myanmar, in Burma, we are moved in many different ways. We're moved because of personal experience. And we understand that unless we stand up now and say this is simply unacceptable and something we must fight against, we not only open it up to ourselves, we open it up to anyone. One of the greatest historians, the greatest speakers around the issue of Holocaust, of genocide, Elie Wiesel, who was a survivor himself of Auschwitz, of the horrendous machinations of the Nazi regime, understood that it was his obligation to speak up against any genocide. Because a genocide against any nation allows it to become normal. Now, that sounds real strange. How can you allow genocide to become normalized? Yet we have. Not only during World War II, in 1938, 80 years ago, countries throughout the world met in a place called Evian, France. And in this huge conference where everyone got together, they heard about the plight of the Jewish people in Germany, the plans of the Nazis. At that time, the final solution was not on deck. It was not thought of completely, but certainly the incredible oppression and driving out of the Jewish people from Germany was certainly present. But our commendation, and you're right, we may disagree on some stuff. Hey, that's the nature of being a human being. We can all disagree on things. But we must agree on the moral high ground. We must agree that genocide, or the effect that it is having on the Rohingya people, not only today, because I want to tell you one other thing. Not only will I see my mother-in-law tonight or speak to her about and celebrate this holiday. She herself was in the death camps. She herself and her sisters survived the death camps. We're seeing my wife. And my wife is a second-generation survivor. And we have done substantive research on the effect of survivors on the second generation. And now we're starting substantive research, both psychological and physiological, by the way. I know the good doctor, and I'm sorry I'm not going to hear your remarks, but I will tell you one thing. I have a real affinity for Brookdale Hospital. I was born there. I was born in Brookdale Hospital when it wasn't known as Brookdale Hospital, it was known as Bethel. And Bethel was founded by the Jewish community of Brooklyn, I believe 100 years ago.
Yes.
And then it became Brookdale, and I grew up in that neighborhood, so I have a real affinity. But as the good doctor will understand, that the horror of such actions that is happening to the Rohingya people today not only affect those who have been chased out of their homes, that have been murdered, that have been raped, it will affect their children and their children's children. Even after we find the diplomatic understandings and we, God willing, will find ways of returning them to their homes, may or may not happen, by the way. Their children and their children's children, and possibly their children's children's children, will all be affected by the horrific events that happening right now, both physiologically and psychologically. So it is not just a crisis of today, it is a crisis of tomorrow as well. In a world that has close to 60 million refugees. It's a scary scenario. So again, I want to commend the Bangladeshi community, A, for pulling together this forum, but working as a nation and as a people to gain that moral high ground, to ensure that people such as the Rohingya that are being persecuted in such a way have a place to be and to be safe. You certainly put out the message loud and clear. It's a small country with a lot of people with a lot of problems. It's not a place that has a lot of extra resources to throw around, but it's a country that sees morality in the light of their faith and their peoplehood. And it's therefore the obligation of my community, the Jewish community, to stand not only with you, but behind you. And to see how we can become absolute and total partners in the process of not only helping to solve the problem, but making sure that in the mix of 60 million refugees, that this refugee problem of 1 million people, nearly 1 million people, is not forgotten. And doesn't get overlooked because it doesn't have the news and it doesn't have the media play. And that faith leaders will go to this country and avoid talking about it because of, well, multiple reasons. We know what it's like when faith leaders don't talk about other people being killed. We certainly saw that during the Holocaust, when faith leaders turned a blind eye to the concentration camps and the death scenario in the final solution. So again, I want to commend you, I want to thank you, and I want to pledge our partnership for not only the present, but the future.
Thank you, sir. As Israel has been selling a huge amount of sophisticated sophisticated arms to Myanmar, and they have also sent what is the word for Ron Authority? Carrier. Yeah. So is it possible for you people here, who are also the Jews and also the American Jews or Israeli American, is it possible to send a message to the government of the Israel, at least not to sell those type of sophisticated arms to the country which are really using those their might and their economic might or their diplomatic might or their military might against an armless community?
So I do want to say this, is that I don't speak for the state of Israel, so not my job.
I understand.
As they say, it's above my pay scale. And the other thing is that we certainly have relationships with the government of Israel, but we are not Israeli Americans. I am an American Jew living in New York City that has a relationship with the government of Israel through our organizational structure. And what we can do is we can enter into a dialogue with partners and others to look at these issues. However, we cannot tell our brothers and sisters, as you can tell, here as Bangladeshi Americans, you can't tell the government of Bangladesh what to do. So, and also this is not my particular area of expertise. However, I know that Melanie wants to speak to that, and the ADL has taken some stance on these kinds of issues. We're the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and therefore we are concerned.
That distinction as we think about the issues that are important to us here and being able to work here, but that does not mean that we don't have relationships with our brothers and sisters in Israel and with the government as well. And so I can say that a coalition or a newly forming coalition of Jewish organizations have discussed this issue. I know that the Israeli government has recently declared that they will no longer, or that they are not selling military weapons to Myanmar, and that they have pledged this publicly. So that is encouraging. That is something that we were very encouraged to see as well, and we will continue to follow up on this issue. So I just wanted to point that out, that has come out publicly as well. The Anti-Defamation League has a two-part mission: to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all. And we take really seriously that two-part mission, because it doesn't apply, while it started here in the US, actually in the South after essentially the lynching of a Jewish man who was a lawyer many years ago, over 104 years ago. That mission really is an international mission, because everywhere we look, we have to think about the protection of our communities, whether it's my community or your community. It's been raised again here many times that the world is getting smaller and our fates are more and more interconnected. And the more that we recognize that fact and work together based on that shared understanding about our shared future, the more success and the more ability we have to really make change and to work together to make those changes. We are devastated watching the images and the hate that is just emanating from the situation of the Rohingya. I think Rabbi Kaplan expressed very clearly that the Jewish people are no strangers to these kinds of experiences. In our letter that we recently sent, along with many people who signed on to it, to Secretary of State Tillerson, we called it tantamount to genocide and, clear ethnic cleansing. And we believe very strongly that, this is what is happening and there's no beating around the bush. And so these are calls to action for me personally, for the people that I work with every day here in New York, but for our organization that, operates internationally as well. So, what we can do is to stand with our brothers and sisters here in the Bangladeshi community and support you and work together on the issues that, that we're facing. I know that my colleagues who work in our international affairs team are doing a lot of different efforts to, oversee what we can be doing more in terms of, actions on the ground and diplomatically. We are activating, all the resources of Jewish communities that are at our disposal to prepare, whether it be funding, whether it be, pushing our political and elected leaders to make, to make change, to look at the situation for what it is. It was actually only after that letter that was sent to Secretary of State Tillerson that he came out and himself came and said, this is actually ethnic cleansing. So we see those changes happening. It may be slow, but as Mr. Rahman said before, diplomacy is the act of the possible, and we are taking what we have at our disposal and making the possible happen. And so I'm just proud to be here, with you all. Unfortunately, I too am going to have to leave after this because I have my kids at home for lighting the first candle. We're a little late. But I really appreciate, the organization of this forum. I really appreciated hearing, the different perspectives that were applied before. My own personal background is in security and diplomacy, so those arguments in fact spoke very clearly and directly to me at a personal level. And so I just want to say thank you again. Thank you to Sir.
You have one more thanks.
Sure.
Pending from the community, from Bangladesh American community. Brothers and sisters, the very bad incident that happened.
Of course, we all know, some of you are certainly experts here, and I appreciate being on the panel with people with very sophisticated perspective on the crisis. And so thank you for this, Brother Chowdhury and Brother Rahman, and also Doctor and all of the distinguished guests. I'm with the NGO community, human rights activist, and so we are going to be more critical of some of the efforts underway by the governments, and I think that comes with the territory being a human rights advocate. Let me just now, because this is, I guess, the Archer Blood. This is like a think tank, or sort of like the Council on Foreign Relations, I think. So it's certainly more scholarly than I expected, and I don't know if the slideshow will be quite at that level. But let me see if we can quickly skate over some of this. I think most people here know about the Rohingya, that they've been in Rakhine State for hundreds of years. There are claims and counterclaims. Of course, we as advocates and supporters of the Rohingya point out that in the 18th century, the European explorers noticed the Rohingya. However, in Burma itself, in Myanmar, they have their own scholars. Frankly, their scholars are fake scholars, but they insist that Rohingya were only started calling themselves that in the 1950s or even in the 1990s. That is their claim, which is belied by what Rohingya tell you themselves and what a lot of people in Burma who are fair-minded would tell you. However, this ethnic group did not get everyone's attention until more recently. There are 135 ethnicities, as mentioned. The Rakhine State area is very diverse, and in fact, there were Muslim kingdoms there during the, I believe, the 15th, 16th century. However, one thing that could be said about the diversity of Myanmar and of the Rohingya is that as Amartya Sen has stated, Rohingya did not come to Burma, but Burma came to the Rohingya, which means that those nation-state boundaries formed by British Empire in the 1820s, were really imposed on a very complex area with a lot of trade going back and forth. And so, and again, there were some people, Indians, for example, coming from the British Empire, who did come and help administer the colony of Burma, and yet they are now being conflated with the Rohingya, who have been there for so many hundreds of years, many of them. So this is all very politicized, and some of you know about what happened in the 2015 census, where the Rohingya were essentially left out. It's a very politicized game they're playing, and as part of the ongoing persecution. Rohingya were recognized in 1948 at independence after the Japanese occupation and the end of that. However, by 1982, they were fully excluded from the citizenship laws, which was referred to earlier. And so what happened? Well, the intervening period of the military dictatorship, which really has been pushing apartheid policies and violent repression of the Rohingya, but also of other ethnic groups. And so the persecution has been quite comprehensive and it really seeking to erase identity. Supposedly, though I've never seen a list, I understand over 300 mosques have been destroyed, big and small, and also a lot of the historical monuments have been destroyed. So the attacks in 2012 and 13 really got our attention at Burma Task Force. That's why we came together, basing our work on earlier work by Imam Malik Mujahid, our chairman, to stop the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo and in Bosnia, and also mass rapes like is taking place now. So, we learned that the apartheid system means that, the rights, the access to medical care is much less. You can't get married freely. You cannot, as a Rohingya, travel from village to village. You need to pay bribes to get out of your own village to go to the market. You can't even work or go to school. And in fact, all of these restrictions came one by one, and in the end, in 2015, they were finally prevented from running for office. They had earlier been in the government, in fact, and from voting. So there's a lot of restrictions that have human rights restrictions. So, often the international community is talking about the humanitarian crisis, but when we think about the root causes, those are human rights restrictions. And the military is certainly behind it, but the military has allied itself with the extremist Buddhists, as you know. This is not a battle between Buddhists and Muslims in its essence. It's a political battle, but the Buddhist extremists have indeed reshaped their understanding of Buddhist traditions to be a vehicle for nationalism and Bamar supremacism. So Bamar, which is what Burma comes from, it's one of the dominant groups in Burma, and it does dominate the military. So they are able to fill those stadiums, and they've actually continued to grow. In fact, shockingly, the current crackdown and displacement of Rohingya is very popular now because they've been managing to sell their nationalism throughout Burma. Unfortunately, even some democracy activists now support this. Most of us have seen these pictures, these images of Ratu and his who really leads the Mabata movement. However, I should say that in the United States now, Sitagu is a monk who used to be thought of as a leading mainstream and a counter to this movement. but he has in recent months come out as quite extremist, actually meeting with the military and telling them that mass killing of non-Buddhists is okay. And guess what? He's in Texas this coming week, and he's going down to Florida. So he's gotten a visa. Apparently, his incitement to violence is not enough to prevent a visa, and we're sending letters and we're making inquiries why this is. So unfortunately, this created one exodus. You mentioned others, 1978, 1992. 2015 was the boat crisis. The U.S. government actually was very helpful in airlifting supplies to a lot of these people in the boats. And then following that, there were the elections in November 2015, apparently free and fair. Everyone was elated. Aung San Suu Kyi won. However, as you see in this cartoon, who's in the back seat really driving? It is indeed the military, General Lane, and that really does seem to be quite accurate. And she seemed part of the story for the West. You know, how could this human rights icon, who had such strength of character to resist the military, how could she is in back of this? So just skipping ahead quickly, in 2016, she came into office in April of 2016 because it took a few months for her to take office. And then by October, the honeymoon was basically over. There were attacks, as you see, quite a number of them, and mass rapes. And the UN actually had, we had been pushing for a commission of inquiry, which is a kind of action that can be taken. But they agreed to send an investigative team into Burma to investigate these attacks in 2016. However, to date, up to today, the government of Myanmar refuses to allow them to enter, to do the investigation. Oh, this is not moving. Let's see if I can move this ahead. So this clearance operation, again, Aung San Suu Kyi has denounced these allegations of mass rape as fake rape, which is pretty shocking. And this all took place spurred on by an attack by ARSA, which was also mentioned. Our group is somewhat, we're not security professionals, and we see human rights as a complementary frame for this issue, not alternative to security. And yet we do see how politicized the security narrative can become. And the Myanmar government is playing up security fears about this ARSA group. ARSA did attack border posts, and they are a problem. And yet, to say that they're run by Al-Qaeda, none of this has been true. Has been proved. Al-Qaeda would love to get involved, but there's no proof that that's really happening in Myanmar. However, people may be becoming radicalized by their oppression, and that would not be surprising. So the government is playing up the whole Rohingya community as a security threat, and that is a popular narrative. The one positive thing that Aung San Suu Kyi did do, though, is she appointed the Rakhine Commission, headed by Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the UN. And even though we didn't expect it to be credible, frankly, it was credible. There are some loopholes in it. There are some. It doesn't solve everything, but it's still, the Myanmar military had been building up their troop levels in the region and blockading villages, and there was hunger, and people couldn't eat, and they couldn't get water, and there were mass arrests beginning in some areas. There was a lot of pressure. We saw that, we heard that. People like Ed Royce, champions in Congress, knew that, were sending letters. The special rapporteur, Yang Hee Lee, was sending letters. We saw something coming. We didn't know it would be this bad, but it was coming. So we're not letting ARSA off the hook, but we are saying that the Myanmar government used that as a pretext after creating conditions that provoked them to unfortunate action. So the Kofi Annan peace plan seemed to be rather destroyed, and so we all know that since then, over 250, this says 284 villages have been burned. And there are many satellite images now. Initially, it was hard because of the weather, but we see that so many villages and communities have been destroyed. There is no direct access to international community. However, there are really brave Rohingya who are reporting back, and people are in touch with them. So half the remaining Rohingya have fled into Bangladesh, and it's amazing that Bangladesh has been able to accommodate so many, and it's absolutely necessary the international community support and fund the humanitarian relief. This is the special rapporteur, a really heroic person who at this point was talking about the gang rapes and sexual violence. Today in the UN, I was at the Security Council meeting for at least half of it, and it was quite well presented. I didn't stay for the rebuttal by Myanmar's ambassador, but there was the Pramila Patton, who is the special rapporteur on violence against women in conflict, and she spoke very eloquently about her visit to Bangladesh and the camps and the testimonies of the women. So the rapes and sexual assaults are a major problem here that needs to be addressed. And we see the two Aung San Suu Kyis. The heroic Aung San Suu Kyi used to say, rape is rife. It is used as a weapon by Burmese armed forces to intimidate the ethnic nationalities and to divide our country. She said that in 2011 about other ethnic groups who were also attacked. And frankly, they are sometimes overlooked right now, but the Kachin and the Karen people, the Mon, the Shan, have suffered and continue to suffer, perhaps not at this level, but quite seriously. Now she's complicit and says the Burmese armed forces are not free to rape, pillage, and torture. They're not free to they're free to fight. Military matters are left to the army. She said other things too that have called it fake rape. So it's very, we shouldn't put all the blame on Aung San Suu Kyi, but it's very, very disappointing. Let me just quickly go through this so that I can get to the end. So her first person that the Pope visited, he certainly showed that he thought he was the most important. He's going to be running for office and trying to defeat Aung San Suu Kyi. Aung San Suu Kyi is not in an easy situation. Being so problematic, it was mentioned that Israel is selling arms and weaponry, but so is Russia, so is Serbia, so is Ukraine, so is Pakistan. Why is Pakistan, a Muslim nation, doing that? So is India. So these other nations need to be challenged as well, and I have heard that in Israel that some rabbis have been challenging this. I have not seen a lot of news reports about the decision to stop selling arms, and it makes me a little bit uncertain whether in fact they have stopped. But I do see that there is pressure, and Nikki Haley, in fact, has said, and I appreciate her willingness to put this out there, any country that is currently providing weapons to the Burmese military should suspend these activities until sufficient accountability measures are in place. So she's really basically calling for an embargo. Hopefully our allies will all listen, and all the others will listen. Displacement affects the whole region, and this is why that we think that it is not just an internal matter, as Myanmar likes to say, and it's trying to convince ASEAN countries that this is just an internal matter. Don't speak up, Malaysia. This is just internal. Right now, you all know better than I about what's going on in Bangladesh, the challenges there. I should mention that the government of Bangladesh has not shelved this plan to move now 100,000 Rohingya to the island of Thengar Char, which is very problematic because there's no trees, there's no food, there's no infrastructure, and it floods half the year. I mean, really, it sinks into the water. So it's not a very viable plan, certainly for the long term. And then the repatriation deal, which was also mentioned, is frankly also full of questions, as has been acknowledged. The international community, especially the UN agencies like UNHCR, were not part of this bilateral agreement. Neither were any Rohingya leaders. So how will it be implemented when we're relying on the Tatmadaw Burmese military to suddenly rebuild the houses that they burned. It seems like there are many questions, and of course the Myanmar government has not committed to relocating or resettling Rohingya refugees in their own towns and villages yet. So there's so many big questions. There were some reports yesterday of a new plan to get a group of international leaders together to help implement this plan, including Bill Richardson, if you've heard of him, formerly in Congress, I think, or governor. So whether that's just a fig leaf or a smokescreen, or whether it's can really help, we don't know yet. So there's stuff to work with. The UN Nobel laureates, of course, the High Commissioner of Human Rights has been quite outspoken. He just said a few days ago, can anyone rule out that elements of genocide may be present? It's important that both faith leaders stand with us and acknowledge the pain. Pope Francis said, we won't close our hearts or look away. The presence of God today is also called Rohingya. Very powerful statement. He didn't say that to the military's face, but he did say that later, and he hasn't given up. So the Muslim community, obviously it's part of our values, basic values, to get involved. That's clear. It's also clear from how Turkey has taken in Syrians, how Jordanians have taken in Syrians. So our record, at least in this respect, is clear. But we, meanwhile, should be calling this genocide, according to our NGO, because that requires action, according to international human rights law. Calling it ethnic cleansing doesn't create that obligation. It is both, of course. Emergency aid is needed. A safe zone is something that we're calling from. Controversial because not all safe zones have worked out. Srebrenica did not work out. But if it is with strong peacekeeping force, with a mandate to protect and defend, we think that this is a possibility. Just to send in monitors without that kind of mandate may be a recipe for disaster, but we don't see how people can be resettled without an international presence. And then finally, we ask for sanctions, as in Congress. It was great to see the sanctions HR 90 passed last week, but that is also not as strong as HR 4223 and Senate bill, which is also in the pipeline. And we hope that early in 2018 we will see a lot of signers to that, which will push our government to get it more involved. You can go to our website. Every week we have a new action alert, we have a new newsletter, we have a different strategy every week, and it's a great way to involve your communities. And we do activism and international meetings. We meet with our Rohingya partners. You'll see Bob Kaplan, who just left us, in this picture down there on the left, I guess that is. And finally, just to end in this note, it is up to the Rohingya themselves to make, and all the Burmese people to come to accommodation and to build peace. It can't be imposed from outside. And so they're not only victims, they're agents of their own future, and we need to support them. Very few Rohingya here in New York. Those that I know are traveling at the moment, but they are our partners, and we want to help them and their voices be heard, and we really hope and pray for peace. So hopefully this presentation will help a little. Thank you.
I want to be here. I have a question. On behalf of the Burma Task Force, you are working at the United Nations for the whole people. So Bangladesh is a strong partner in the Rohingya issue. Are you in touch with Bangladesh mission to the United Nations? And do you get, my question is, are they responsive to your need? Or do you have any collaboration in your work with Bangladesh mission to the United Nations?
Good question. Well, our chairman, Imam Malik Mujahid, has met, I think, 3 times in the last few months with the ambassador in Washington, and speaking about safe zones, about needs of relief, because he's also been to the camps a few times. One thing is that I just learned that we have somebody in Washington now who's a consultant for us, and he's been meeting on the Hill with some of the representatives who have said they'd be happy to recommend that the U.S. military or Navy supply some support for transportation of supplies, emergency supplies, because there are bottlenecks. They get stuck, and they don't always get to all those hundreds of thousands of people. And so, but we were told that it's up to the Bangladeshi government to request that. And so it can't be from us, and it can't just be from Congress. It has to be from the government of Bangladesh. So we're hoping that that will happen, and there won't be a bottleneck that we are part of. But at the same time, whether it's about relief supplies, whether it's about repatriation deal, we're very open to conversations with the Bangladeshi government, even if we make some criticisms. We really appreciate the positive role they've taken to host so many. And we hope that we can build, and I'd be very interested to know people's suggestions about how to do that.
The presiding person just conclude with the conclusion remarks, but this is not the case for tonight. I request our president, to speak and to conclude. Dr. Mujibur Majumdar.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank all the distinguished guests that came here today. That's such an important international issue. Thank all the audience for making time and take this an important issue into their heart and be here and listening to all this presentation. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just would like to address a few things. I'm a doctor. I might look into problem in a different way than a diplomat or a security specialist. It comes with the territory. I see disease. I don't believe in treating the symptom. I like to believe treating the problem. So my approach in looking at national internal issue will be a little different than other people. First of all, Rohingyas are been established that they are the original ethnic people of that region. Internationally it is recognized, the nations is recognized, it is the responsibility of every nation in this world to understand that and stand for that principle. If we don't stand for principle, we know in history what happened to 6 million Jews, what happened to the people that was dying in Serbia, and what happened in Rwanda. When we close our eyes, we know the result of it. In 21st century, in this kind of world, if we civilized people keep our eyes closed and try to divert the problem in different angle, that's a shame for this civilized world. I'm sorry to say that, but this is a shame. It cannot be tolerated. You have to understand the basic thing in this problem. These people living there for ages. Now in 1982, somebody come and tell that they are no longer citizen of this country. As if today, if somebody in this country, the president of this country, or the Congress in this country say that all Hispanics are no longer citizen of America, staying in America, or all Native Americans are no longer citizen of this country, or all African Americans are no longer citizen of this country, or all Catholics are no longer citizen of this country. Is it acceptable? Is it acceptable by any of these Americans? I would like to ask them. If it's not acceptable by any of this, why it will be acceptable by the Rohingyas? And why we're trying to divert the issue here? That's their right. They've been there for more than 800 years. It is the fruit that colonial power gave to this region. We must understand this. And trying to divert the solution, we are basically putting the thing under the rug. This problem started in 1978. Again, it happened in 1991, 92. Again, it happened in 2012, 2015, 16, 17. And if we just try to pacify the whole problem, it's going to happen again and again and again. What Rohingya did to this world to be punished like this. We all born as a human. We don't born as a Muslim, we don't born as a Christian, we don't born as a Jewish, we don't born as an American, we don't born as a Bangladeshi or Indian. We all born as a human, and every human has the same right. Today, Rohingyas has no right. You have seen that they are being treated worse than South African apartheid, and whole world is silent. It's a shame to all of us. It's a shame to all of us to accept this and trying to keep a blind eye to this and try to pacify Aung San Suu Kyi or whoever it is. America is the master of human rights. Along with America, European countries and many other civilized countries are also following the path of America to establish human rights in this world. It is America, when he saw what is happening in Serbia, initially tried to convince them diplomatically, but they had a stick behind it, and they used the stick to stop the genocide in Serbia. We cannot just talk. We have to have a stick behind it, has to have a power, and we cannot accept what is happening. America has to stand up. Along with that, European country and every country in this world should stand up and establish the basic principle of human rights, no longer talk, and pacify this situation. I'm sorry to be a little emotional, but that's what it is. You need to establish their right first. So I propose from this organization, with the spirit of Archer Blood, who stood for democracy, human rights, and who sacrificed his career by speaking out the genocide that happened in Bangladesh. We are the same people with this organization who like to stood up and tell what exactly has to be told. Our proposal is recognize Rohingya as a legitimate citizen of Myanmar. They have to have a political power so that they cannot be victimized again and again and again. So that's the first principle you have to establish. Recognize Arkan, which is the fundamental state they had as an independent state before British took over, as their state, so that they have a political establishment there to protect themselves. Trial of all Burmese army officers and political and religious leaders for the genocide, and ethnic cleansing of Rohingyas international court. That has to be moved in, so that these people, like in Serbia, those generals that are now facing trial and taking potassium cyanide in the courtroom, they have to face the same fate. There's no less. Burmese politician or religious leader or army officer is not above us. They're the same, and we have to stood up as united and face this tyranny for once for all. Assure return of all Rohingyas refugees to their home in Rakhine, Myanmar. Provide United Nations peacekeeping force to Arakan region for their safety in Myanmar. Provide safe entrance and exit from Bangladesh-Burmese border. Provide food, sanitation, drinking water, shelter, and medical help to all Rohingyas in Bangladesh at present by the United Nations and international community. Provide vaccine, medical care, and education to children of Rohingyas refugees, and to provide financial and logistic help by the international community for rehabilitation of Rohingyas in Myanmar upon their return. These are the basic fundamental right and proposal that we as an organization support. We need your support. We must be together to fight this inhuman, despicable people that are running this so-called Myanmar. And if we keep our eyes closed and try to pacify this thing, one of these days we'll say sorry that we did not play our part as a civilized human being, that what we observed in Rwanda, this is going to happen right in front of our eyes in this century, which in the history of this world, down the line, somebody will write, being such a civilized world with so much technology, we decided to keep our eyes closed and let an innocent people die without any recourse. Thank you for all coming. Hope we can work together and understand the fundamental problem and solve from its bottom, not just symptomatic treatment. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is time to close, but before I close, I want to say something about my president. In fact, this is his first speech I have heard, and I can assure you that I'm really proud to be working under a president like him. And I see Xavier has been taking note from the very beginning, and for who came later, I want to tell you Mr. Xavier is the scheduling officer for the congressman, Bronx District Manager as well, Congressman Adriano Espalat. He's the only congressman in the House Foreign Affairs Committee from New York. And with all these, we organized, just 1 second, we tried to organize to bring together all the community faith people so that we can unitedly denounce what is going on in Myanmar. That is, United States, including the United Nations, have declared it the textbook example of ethnic cleansing. So, yeah, in other words, it is, I think, I don't know the difference, but I think it's less close to the genocide. Yeah. So through Xavier, I'd like to request Xavier to, United States Congress has declared it ethnic cleansing. So if there is ethnic cleansing, it is time to take action. We request through our congressmen, to the Congress members, to take action now. It is the time to take action. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.